You need to be more realistic about your situation, Mother. Preston's voice carried that patronizing tone I'd grown to recognize over the past few years. We sat across from each other at my cherrywood dining table, the one Walter and I had saved for months to buy when we were newlyweds. The morning light filtered through lace curtains I'd hung myself decades ago, casting latticed shadows across my son's increasingly impatient face. At your age, living alone in this big house isn't practical. We're just thinking about what's best for you. His wife Deirdre nodded emphatically beside him, her manicured nails tapping rhythmically against her coffee mug. The sound grated on my nerves like sandpaper. I took a measured sip of my tea, hiding my trembling hands beneath the table. At 71, I'd buried my husband, survived breast cancer, and weathered more storms than these two could imagine. Yet here they were, treating me like a child who couldn't make her own decisions. I'm perfectly capable of managing on my own. Thank you, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. This has been my home for 43 years. I know every creaking floorboard and stubborn window. Deirdre sighed dramatically, exchanging a look with Preston that made my stomach tighten. That look, I'd seen it too many times lately. The one that said, "Poor confused old woman, she doesn't know what's good for her." "Vivian," Deirdre said, using my first name as she always did, never Mom or even Mrs. Blackwood. "Property taxes in this neighborhood keep rising. Maintenance on a house this age is expensive. And with your fixed income," I let her words fade into background noise, having heard this speech before. What they didn't know, what no one knew except my late husband Walter and our family attorney, was that my fixed income was merely the public face of our finances. The modest pension and Social Security checks were just what I allowed them to see. Behind this facade lay a fortune of $22 million carefully built through Walter's brilliant, quiet investments and my own shrewd management after his death. We'd always lived modestly, saving and investing while our friends bought vacation homes and luxury cars. Walter used to say, "Live like you're poor, invest like you're rich." We could sell this place for at least $1. $2 million in today's market, Preston continued, pulling me back to the conversation. His eyes gleamed with the same look he'd had as a child, eyeing the cookie jar. "You could move into Sunny Pines Retirement Village. It's a beautiful community, and we'd visit every weekend." I nearly choked on my tea. Sunny Pines was where people went to die, not live. I'd visited a friend there once. Institutional food, paper-thin walls, and a pervasive smell of disinfectant masking something worse. And as for visiting every weekend? Preston and Deirdre had visited me exactly 7 times in the past year, usually when they needed something. "I appreciate your concern," I said carefully, "but I'm staying put." Deirdre's smile tightened. "Don't be stubborn, Vivian. Preston is executor of your estate. We're just trying to plan ahead." Something in her tone made the hair on my arm stand up. There it was, the first time they'd directly mentioned their authority over my affairs. I'd named Preston as executor years ago when Walter first got sick. It had seemed natural then, trusting my only child to honor my wishes. I stood up, gathering the teacups. "I think I'll work in the garden this afternoon. The hydrangeas need attention." As I turned toward the kitchen, I caught their reflection in the hallway mirror, heads bent together, whispering, their expressions calculating. A chill ran through me despite the warm spring day. This wasn't just concerned family members worrying about an aging parent. This was something predatory. What would you do if you were in my position? Trust your instincts that something's wrong, or dismiss it as paranoia and trust your only son? That night, I couldn't sleep. Their voices echoed in my head as I stared at the ceiling, watching shadows dance across the plaster. Walter had been gone 5 years now. I missed his warmth beside me, his quiet wisdom. "What would you do?" I whispered to the empty pillow next to mine. The next morning I called my old friend Octavia Washington. Tavi and I had met in college, 2 women determined to get our degrees when many of our peers were focusing solely on finding husbands. She'd gone on to become one of the first Black female judges in our district before retiring. If anyone would give me straight advice, it would be Tavi. She hummed after I explained the situation. "Sounds like they're circling like vultures, Viv. Not the first time I've seen this happen." "Am I overreacting?" I asked, desperate for reassurance. "Trust your gut," Tavi said firmly. If something feels off, it probably is. Remember Mrs. Abernathy from my church? Her son convinced her to sign over her house, promising to take care of her. 2 months later, she was in a nursing home while he rented out her property. My throat tightened. What should I do? Document everything. And I mean everything. Get yourself one of those little recording devices. Check your financial paperwork. Make sure nothing's been changed without your knowledge. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, mind racing. Was I really in danger from my own son? The thought seemed melodramatic, but then I remembered the look in Deirdre's eyes when she mentioned my fixed income, the way Preston had been asking to help organize my financial documents. 2 days later, I found my answer. I'd installed a small camera in my study, something I'd ordered online after talking to Tavi. It felt ridiculous, spying in my own home, but I needed to know if my suspicions were justified. Preston and Deirdre had come over for Sunday dinner, bringing the grandchildren as they occasionally did. Zoe and Hudson were good kids at heart, though increasingly distant, absorbed in their devices and parroting their parents' dismissive attitude toward me. After dinner, while I was helping Hudson with a school project in the kitchen, the camera captured Preston and Deirdre in my study. They were rifling through my desk drawers, examining papers from my filing cabinet. "Mom's getting worse," Preston said, his voice clear on the recording. "Did you see how she forgot the casserole in the oven? Nearly burned the house down." I hadn't forgotten anything. The oven timer had malfunctioned, something I'd explained. "We need to move faster," Deirdre replied. "Get her to sign the power of attorney papers. Dr. Matthews owes you a favor. He could help declare her incompetent." My blood ran cold. Dr. Matthews was an old college friend of Preston's, now a physician at the local hospital. I'd never trusted him. "Once we have control of the house and her accounts, we can figure out what to do with her," Preston continued. "Sunny Pines has openings in their memory care unit." "Memory care?" Deirdre laughed. "She doesn't need memory care. She's sharp as a tack. But who's going to check, really?" They continued talking, discussing my assets like items on a shopping list. My house, my car, even my jewelry, including the sapphire ring Walter had given me on our 30th anniversary. By the time they left that evening, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely wave goodbye. I waited until their car disappeared down the street, then sank onto the sofa, my mind reeling with betrayal. I'd raised Preston with everything I had. When money was tight after Walter lost his job in the recession of '89, I'd taken night shifts at the hospital, working as a nurse while still maintaining our home. I'd attended every baseball game, helped with every school project, nursed him through mono his sophomore year of high school. I'd welcomed Deirdre into our family with open arms, even when Walter had misgivings about her character. And now they were plotting to declare me incompetent, to lock me away and take everything. That night, I didn't cry. Something hardened inside me instead, a resolve that burned away fear and confusion. I might be 71, but I wasn't helpless. Far from it. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Charles Wentworth, the attorney who had helped Walter and me set up our investments, and who was one of the only people who knew about our hidden wealth. The second was to Eleanor Zhao, a lawyer specializing in elder rights whom Tavi had recommended. The third was to my bank, where I requested an appointment with the manager to review all my accounts. "Mrs. Blackwood," Eleanor said when we met at her downtown office the following day, "what you're describing is elder abuse and attempted financial exploitation. With the recording you have, we can file for a protective order immediately." I showed her the video from my study, along with notes I'd been keeping of other suspicious behavior. Preston borrowing my credit card and returning it with unexplained charges. Deirdre insisting on being present during my doctor's appointments. Mail that went missing, particularly bank statements. "I don't want to destroy my son," I said quietly. "I just want to protect myself." Eleanor's eyes softened. "Mrs. Blackwood, I understand. But what they're planning isn't just immoral. It's illegal. They're attempting to strip you of your autonomy and your assets. The law exists to protect people in your situation." By the end of the week, I had a plan in place. Charles had helped me secure my assets even further, moving them into trusts that Preston couldn't touch. Eleanor had filed paperwork for a protective order against both Preston and Deirdre, using the recording as evidence. And I had done something else. something that made me both sad and proud. I'd found a small apartment in a secure building downtown, overlooking the river, not Sunny Pines or any other retirement community. A real home where I could start fresh. The day I planned to tell Preston and Deirdre about the protective order, I sat in my garden one last time. The hydrangeas were blooming, their blue heads nodding in the breeze. Walter and I had planted them the year Preston was born. 45 years of memories in this soil, in these walls. I heard a car in the driveway, Preston's BMW. He was early for our scheduled talk about my future. Straightening my shoulders, I went inside to face my son and the hardest conversation of my life. Preston's face cycled through emotions like a slideshow when Eleanor served him the protective order. Confusion, shock, outrage, and finally, a calculating stillness that reminded me of Walter during business negotiations. Deirdre, beside him on my sofa, turned from porcelain pale to angry red. "This is ridiculous," she spluttered. "We were trying to help you." Eleanor, composed in her charcoal suit, simply adjusted her glasses. "The court disagrees, Mrs. Blackwood. The evidence is quite clear." I sat across from them, hands folded in my lap to hide their trembling. Not from fear, from restraint. Part of me wanted to shout, to demand how they could betray me so completely. But I'd never been one for dramatic scenes. "I've heard your plans for me," I said quietly. "The memory care unit. Dr. Matthews declaring me incompetent." Preston's jaw tightened. "You were spying on us? In our own home?" "My home," I corrected. "And yes, after noticing documents missing and hearing your whispered conversations, I protected myself." "Mom." Preston leaned forward, his voice softening to that cajoling tone he'd used since childhood when caught misbehaving. "You misunderstood. We're worried about you living alone. Your health is excellent," I finished for him. "As my doctor, my real doctor, not your friend Matthews, confirmed last week." Eleanor handed them each a folder. "This protective order prevents you from accessing Mrs. Blackwood's financial accounts, medical records, or legal documents. You are also prohibited from removing any items from this property without explicit written permission." Deirdre flipped through the pages, her French manicured nails clicking against the paper. "This is temporary," she said, more to herself than to us. "We'll fight it." "You're welcome to try," Eleanor replied evenly. "But the video evidence is compelling, as is the testimony from Mrs. Blackwood's bank regarding the unauthorized credit card charges." I watched my son's face harden into something unrecognizable. The little boy who'd once crawled into my lap after nightmares was buried somewhere beneath this stranger's cold expression. "You've always been difficult," he said finally. "Dad protected you from yourself. Someone has to make decisions for you." The casual cruelty of his words stung worse than a slap. Walter had never protected me from myself. We'd been partners, equals. Preston had rewritten our marriage into something unrecognizable to justify his actions. "I've already made my decisions," I said, rising to my feet with as much dignity as I could muster. "I'm selling this house. I've purchased a new place downtown. And I'm establishing a foundation for elder advocacy." Preston's laugh was ugly. "With what money? Your pension barely covers your medications." For a moment, I considered telling him everything. About the $22 million, about how Walter and I had invested quietly for decades while living modestly, about how the pension they knew about was merely a small portion of my actual income. But something in his expression stopped me. This wasn't about money, not really. It was about power, about seeing me as an obstacle rather than a person. "My finances are no longer your concern," I said instead. "Eleanor will be in touch regarding supervised visits with Zoe and Hudson if they wish to see me." "Supervised?" Deirdre began, outraged. "Given your demonstrated intention to exploit Mrs. Blackwood," Eleanor interjected. "The court has concerns about your influence during family visits." After they left, Preston slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows, I sank back onto the sofa, suddenly exhausted. Eleanor sat beside me, her professional demeanor softening. "You did well," she said, patting my hand. "First confrontations are always the hardest." "He's still my son," I whispered. "I keep thinking of him as a little boy, skinned knees and gap-toothed smile." Eleanor nodded. "That's what makes elder abuse so insidious. It comes from the people we love and trust the most." After she left, I wandered through the empty house, touching familiar surfaces. The banister Walter had refinished, the wallpaper we'd selected together, the window seat where I'd read countless bedtime stories to Preston. 43 years of memories, good and bad, all contained within these walls. My phone rang. Tavi, checking in. "It's done," I told her, sinking into my favorite armchair. "They know about the protective order, but not about the money." "How'd the boy take it?" I closed my eyes. "Like I've betrayed him instead of the other way around." "Mm-hmm," Tavi hummed, a sound that conveyed decades of wisdom and skepticism. "Abusers always play the victim when caught. You still moving forward with the foundation idea?" The foundation had been Tavi's suggestion initially. "What better way to use your millions," she'd said, "than to help other women in your situation, ones without your resources or support?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Charles is setting up the paperwork. We're calling it Second Chapter Foundation." "I like that," Tavi approved. "Because that's what you're starting, Viv. Your second chapter." The next week passed in a blur of activity. Charles and his team helped me inventory every item in the house, photographing and documenting valuables. The realtor placed a "coming soon" sign in the yard. I sorted through 4 decades of possessions, deciding what to take to my new apartment and what to let go. Zoe called once, her voice small and confused. "Grandma? Dad says you're sick and making things up." My heart twisted. "I'm not sick, sweetheart. Your dad and I have some disagreements about how I should live my life. Adult things. Are you mad at us?" The vulnerability in her 13-year-old voice nearly broke me. "Never at you or Hudson," I assured her. "I love you both very much. This is between your parents and me." "Dad took your picture down," she said quietly. "The one from Christmas that was on the mantel." After we hung up, I sat with that information, letting the hurt wash over me. The systematic erasure had begun, removing physical reminders of my existence from their lives. 2 days later, I received a certified letter. Preston was contesting the protective order and requesting a competency hearing. He'd included affidavits from Dr. Matthews and 2 other experts who had never met me, all suggesting I was suffering from paranoid delusions. Eleanor was unsurprised when I called her. "Standard tactics," she explained. "They're hoping to overwhelm you, make you doubt yourself, or give in just to end the conflict. What do? We counter with assessments from your actual physicians, and we use your financial records to demonstrate your continued competence. Managing investments worth millions doesn't align with their claim of cognitive decline." The revelation about my finances would come sooner than I'd planned, but perhaps that was for the best. No more hiding, no more pretending to be less capable than I was. "There's something else," Eleanor added. "A woman named Judith Carroll contacted our office this morning. She says she's Deirdre's former mother-in-law." My interest piqued. Deirdre was married before? Briefly, in her 20s. According to Mrs. Carroll, Deirdre and her son Todd had a similar dynamic with her, pressuring her to move out of her home, suggesting memory issues when she resisted. "Mrs. Carroll wants to provide a statement for your case." A pattern, then. Not just opportunity or circumstance, but a deliberate strategy they'd attempted before. That evening, as I packed books into boxes, my doorbell rang. Standing on my porch was Hudson, my 11-year-old grandson, his bike thrown haphazardly on the lawn behind him. "Hudson!" I exclaimed, surprised and delighted. "Does your father know you're here?" He shook his head, brown eyes serious beneath his mop of dark hair. "I rode over after soccer practice. Dad thinks I'm at Jason's house." I ushered him inside, anxiety mixing with joy. Under the protective order, Preston and Deirdre weren't supposed to know where I was going next. But if Hudson knew my new address— "I brought this back," he said, pulling something from his pocket, my sapphire ring. "I heard Mom telling Dad she was going to sell it. She took it last time we visited." My breath caught as he placed the ring in my palm. Walter's gift, the one Deirdre had apparently stolen right out of my jewelry box. "Hudson," I said carefully, "that was very brave and honest of you. But taking things without permission is wrong, even if you're returning them to their rightful owner." He looked down. "I know, but they're being mean to you. Dad called you crazy. But you're not crazy, Grandma. You made me dinosaur-shaped pancakes last month and remembered all their scientific names." I hugged him close, inhaling the little boy smell of grass and sweat that clung to him. Thank you for believing in me. After cookies and milk, I called Jason's mother, a woman I'd met at several school functions, and arranged for Hudson to be picked up. I didn't mention Preston or the protective order, just that Hudson had visited without permission and needed a ride to Jason's as planned. Once he was safely gone, I called Eleanor and reported the stolen ring, now recovered. More evidence for our case. The competency hearing was scheduled for the following week. In preparation, I met with Dr. Jasmine Patel, the psychologist Eleanor had recommended for an independent evaluation. Dr. Patel's office was warm and inviting, with plants in every corner and comfortable furniture that didn't scream medical facility. Mrs. Blackwood, she said after our 3-hour assessment, I see no evidence whatsoever of cognitive impairment or paranoia. Your memory, reasoning, and judgment are all excellent for a person of any age. Will that be enough? I asked. Against 3 doctors who claim otherwise? She smiled grimly. Those doctors haven't spent any time evaluating you. I have. And more importantly, the financial records speak for themselves. A person with dementia doesn't successfully manage millions in investments. The day before the hearing, I moved into my new apartment. It was smaller than my house, of course, but the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river made it feel spacious and bright. I'd brought only what mattered most: Walter's books, family photos, yes, including Preston, the quilt my grandmother had made, my gardening references. Charles helped me arrange movers, and Tavi came over with Chinese takeout once they'd gone. We sat on packing boxes, eating lo mein, straight from the containers. How are you feeling about tomorrow? Tavi asked. I twirled noodles around my fork, considering. Sad, angry, relieved in a way. No more pretending. That boy never deserved you, Tavi said bluntly. Walter would be heartbroken to see what he's become. I keep wondering where I went wrong, I admitted. Was I too indulgent? Did I fail to teach him empathy? Tavi fixed me with her judge's stare. Vivian Blackwood, you stop that right now. Some people just make bad choices no matter how they were raised. Look at my Jeremy. Same upbringing as his brother, but one's a doctor and one's serving time for fraud. I nodded, but the questions lingered. Nature or nurture? Where had my sweet little boy gone? The courtroom the next morning was smaller than I'd expected, more intimate. Preston and Deirdre sat with their attorney, a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit. Preston wouldn't meet my eyes. Deirdre stared daggers. I testified first, walking the court through the evidence, the recording, the stolen ring, the unauthorized credit card charges. Then came the financial revelations, with Charles presenting documentation of my investments, property holdings, and the careful management that had grown Walter's initial investments into $22 million. I'll never forget Preston's face when the true figures were read into the record. Shock, then calculation, then a desperate sort of hunger that made me shiver despite the courtroom's warmth. This wasn't my son anymore. This was someone who saw me as nothing but dollar signs. I'm facing a critical moment. Do I try to rebuild my relationship with my son despite his betrayal? Or do I accept that some bonds are irreparably broken and focus on protecting myself and helping others? Dr. Patel testified about my psychological evaluation. Judith Carroll spoke about her experiences with Deirdre. The bank manager confirmed my regular, competent handling of my accounts. By the time the judge ruled, dismissing Preston's petition and upholding the protective order, it was late. Afternoon. I felt hollow, drained of emotion. We won, Eleanor whispered, squeezing my hand. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like the official end of something that had been dying for years, my relationship with my only child. As we gathered our things to leave, Preston approached, ignoring Eleanor's warning look. $22 million, he said, voice low and tight. All this time, living like we were middle class when you were secretly rich. You let me struggle with student loans, work summer jobs, while you were sitting on a fortune. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. Those struggles made you who you are, Preston. Or they should have. Your father and I believed in earning your way, in appreciating what you have. You lied to me my entire life, he hissed. No, I corrected gently. We just didn't tell you everything. Parents don't owe their children complete financial transparency. What we owed you was love, security, and guidance, and we gave you those in abundance. Deirdre appeared at his elbow, tugging him away. Come on, we're appealing this, it's not over. As they walked away, I realized with perfect clarity that it was, in fact, over. Whatever happened next, appeals, more legal battles, our family as I had known it was finished. Outside the courthouse, standing in the late afternoon sunshine, I took a deep breath of fresh air. Eleanor was talking about next steps, about the foundation paperwork being finalized next week, about how the house already had multiple offers well above asking price. I half listened, watching a family cross the street in front of us, mother, father, two small children holding hands. The mundane beauty of it brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Vivian?" Eleanor asked, concerned. "Are you all right?" I nodded, wiping my eyes, just thinking about new beginnings, and how sometimes they come when we least expect them. That night in my new apartment, I sat by the windows watching boats on the river, their lights reflecting in the dark water. I thought about Preston as a little boy, about Walter, about the long journey that had brought me here. I was 71 years old, starting over. It wasn't what I'd planned or wanted, but as I looked out at the city lights and the flowing river, I felt something unexpected stirring in my chest. Not just resignation or acceptance, but anticipation, curiosity about what might come next. I picked up my phone and dialed Tavi's number. "It's done," I told her when she answered. "The judge ruled in our favor. The foundation paperwork goes through next week." "So," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "What's next for Vivian Blackwood?" I looked around my new home, boxes still waiting to be unpacked, a new life waiting to be built. "Everything," I answered. "Everything is next." Morning sunlight streamed through my new apartment windows, painting golden rectangles across the hardwood floors. 6 months had passed since the courtroom confrontation with Preston and Deirdre. 6 months of rebuilding, of learning to live with both grief and possibility. I sipped my coffee, reviewing the agenda for today's board meeting. The second chapter foundation was no longer just an idea, but a reality, with office space, staff, and most importantly, clients, women over 60 facing family estrangement, financial exploitation, or housing insecurity. My phone chimed with a text from Eleanor. "Judith's case settled, full property restoration and damages. She says thank you." I smiled, warmth spreading through my chest. Judith Carroll, Deirdre's former mother-in-law, had become our foundation's third client. After testifying at my hearing, she'd found the courage to pursue her own case against her son Todd, who'd sold her vacation property without permission while she was recovering from hip surgery. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Tavi stood in the hallway, elegant as always in a deep purple pantsuit, silver twists piled atop her head. "Ready for the big day?" she asked, sweeping in and placing a bakery box on my counter. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, opening the box to find chocolate croissants. My weakness. "You're trying to fatten me up." "Someone has to," she snorted. "You've lost weight since all this started." She wasn't wrong. Stress, grief, and busy days had whittled me down to bones and determination. I took a bite of buttery pastry, savoring the chocolate as it melted on my tongue. "Any word from the kids?" Tavi asked carefully. I shook my head. Despite the court-approved supervised visitation schedule, Preston and Deirdre had prevented Zoe and Hudson from seeing me. Their ongoing appeal of the protective order was their excuse, though Eleanor assured me it had no legal merit. "Hudson sent a card for my birthday last month," I said. "Mailed it himself from school, I think." Tavi squeezed my hand. "That boy's got spine. Takes after his grandmother." We gathered our things and headed to the foundation's offices downtown. The space was modest but welcoming, warm colors, comfortable furniture, walls adorned with artwork by local female artists over 60. The message was intentional. Aging women weren't invisible here. They were celebrated. Maria, our receptionist, greeted us warmly. "Morning, Mrs. Blackwood, Judge Washington. The boardroom is ready, and Dr. Patel just called. She's running 10 minutes late." Our monthly board meeting brought together the small but dedicated team we'd assembled. Eleanor as legal counsel, Dr. Patel providing psychological support, Charles overseeing finances, and 3 community advocates, retired professionals committed to elder justice. Tavi served as board president, her judicial experience invaluable for navigating bureaucracy. As we reviewed cases and budgets, I felt a familiar surge of purpose. In 6 months, we'd helped 27 women reclaim their lives in various ways, securing housing, recovering stolen assets, obtaining protective orders, connecting them with support services. The waiting list keeps growing, Eleanor noted, scrolling through her tablet. We need to consider expanding. Charles nodded. The endowment can support it. The initial investment of $12 million is performing well. I'd ultimately dedicated just over half my fortune to the foundation. The remainder was carefully managed for my needs and, despite everything, held in trust for Zoe and Hudson when they turned 25, beyond their parents' reach. After the meeting, Tavi and I walked to a nearby cafe for lunch. Spring had finally arrived in earnest, trees budding along the sidewalks, tulips nodding in planters. "Did I tell you I'm teaching a class at the community college?" Tavi mentioned as we waited for our food. "Elder Law 101, mostly retired folks wanting to protect themselves." "You're supposed to be enjoying retirement," I teased. She waved dismissively. "This is my enjoyment. Besides, not all of us can be lady philanthropists of leisure." Our laughter was interrupted by my phone buzzing. Unknown number. Usually, I'd let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Grandma?" A girl's voice, tentative and familiar. My heart stuttered. "Zoe? Sweetheart, is that you?" "Yeah." She sounded nervous. "I'm using my friend Amber's phone. Mom and Dad took mine away after they found Hudson's birthday card to you." Tavi raised her eyebrows, motioning that she'd give me privacy. I shook my head slightly. I wanted her support. "Are you okay?" I asked Zoe, trying to keep my voice steady. "I guess." A pause. "Things are weird at home. Dad quit his job. Mom's always talking about contesting your will, whatever that means, and they fight a lot." My stomach tightened. The appeal wasn't about visitation rights at all. It was about accessing my money even after I was gone. "I miss you," Zoe continued, her voice smaller. "Dad says you don't want to see us, but that's not true, is it?" "No, sweetheart. That's not true at all. I've been trying to arrange visits through the proper channels, but your parents haven't agreed." She was quiet for a moment. "Hudson says you're rich now, like super rich." I closed my eyes. "I've always had financial security, Zoe. I just didn't flaunt it." "Then why did you let Dad struggle with his business? He says you could have helped, but didn't." The familiar guilt twisted in my chest. Preston's custom furniture business had failed 3 years ago, despite multiple cash infusions from Walter and me over the years. He'd always blamed external factors, the economy, changing tastes, suppliers, never his own management decisions. "Your father received a lot of help over the years," I said carefully, "but money doesn't solve every problem, especially when—" I stopped myself from criticizing Preston to his daughter. "Sometimes people need to find their own path." "I might be able to visit," she said suddenly. "There's a field trip downtown next Thursday. I could say I'm not feeling well and meet you somewhere." My heart ached at her suggestion, the secrecy, the planning required for a grandmother to see her grandchild. "I don't want you to lie, Zoe." "But it's the only way." "No, it's not. There are proper legal channels. If you tell your school counselor you want to see me, they can help arrange a supervised visit. Dad says the courts are corrupt, and you manipulated them." "Of course he did." "Zoe, the truth is in the evidence. The recordings, the financial documents, everything was presented fairly." She was silent for so long, I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally, in a rush, "I have to go. Amber needs her phone back. I'll try to call again." After she hung up, I sat motionless, the phone clutched in my hand. "That child is caught in the middle," Tavi observed quietly. "They're poisoning her against me," I whispered, "using her as a pawn." Tavi's expression hardened. "Then we document this call and petition for formal visitation enforcement. No more playing nice." Back at the foundation, Eleanor listened to my recounting of Zoe's call with growing concern. "This is parental alienation," she said, making notes. "And the fact that they're discussing contesting your will with the children present shows their continued fixation on your assets." "Can we force the visitation issue?" I asked. "Yes, but it might get ugly. They could make false allegations to counter. Are you prepared for that? I thought of Zoe's voice, the mixture of confusion and longing, of Hudson, brave enough to return my stolen ring. My grandchildren are worth fighting for. That evening, alone in my apartment, I found myself doing something I'd avoided for months, scrolling through old family photos on my tablet. Preston as a toddler, gap-toothed and gleeful on his new tricycle. As a teenager, proudly holding his science fair trophy. Walter teaching him to fish. Our family Christmas card the year before Walter's cancer diagnosis. Where had it all gone so wrong? The doorbell jolted me from my reverie. Through the peephole, I saw a uniform, building security. Mrs. Blackwood? The young guard said apologetically when I opened the door. There's a situation in the lobby. A man claiming to be your son is demanding to see you. He seems agitated. My pulse quickened. Did he give a name? Preston Blackwood. He's with a woman. They're causing quite a scene. I took a deep breath. I have a protective order against both of them. They're not allowed contact with me. His expression shifted to concern. I'll call the police right away. Wait, I said, surprising myself. Let me come down. Stay with me. But I want to see what this is about. Perhaps it was foolish, but I needed to know if this was about the children. If there was any chance of repairing what was broken. In the lobby, Preston paced like a caged animal, Deirdre sitting rigidly on a bench nearby. Both looked disheveled, nothing like their usual polished appearance. Preston's shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed. Deirdre's makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. They spotted me, emerging from the elevator with the security guard at my side. Preston immediately started toward me, but the guard stepped forward, hand raised. That's close enough, sir. Mom, Preston's voice cracked. We need to talk. You're violating a protective order by being here, I said, keeping my voice level. I should call the police. Please, he said, and something in his tone, desperation without the usual manipulation, gave me pause. It's about the kids. What about them? Deirdre joined him, her usual haughtiness absent. We've lost the house. The bank foreclosed last week. We have nowhere to go. I blinked, processing this. What happened to your savings? Your investments? Preston looked. Away. Gone. Bad investments. Some gambling issues. The pieces clicked into place. The sudden interest in my assets coinciding with their own financial collapse. They'd been drowning and saw me as their life raft. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Whatever they'd done, I took no pleasure in their suffering. But I don't see what it has to do with me. The kids need stability, Deirdre pressed. They're devastated about losing their home, their friends, their school. You've prevented them from seeing me for months, I pointed out. Turned them against me. And now you want my help? Preston's face flushed. We were wrong, okay? Is that what you want to hear? We screwed up, but don't punish Zoe and Hudson for our mistakes. I studied my son, looking for sincerity beneath the desperation. Was this genuine remorse, or just another angle? What exactly are you asking for? They exchanged glances. A loan, Preston said. Or an investment in a new business venture I'm planning. Just enough to get back on our feet. Of course. It always came back to money. No, I said simply. Mom, please. I'm not finished, I continued. I won't give you money directly, but I will do this. I'll rent a modest apartment for 1 year, in my name, where you and the children can live. During that time, you will comply with the visitation schedule set by the court. You will attend family counseling with Dr. Patel. And you, Preston, will participate in Gamblers Anonymous. His face darkened. You're controlling us, just like always. No, I corrected. I'm offering you a choice. Take responsibility and accept help with conditions or don't. But I won't enable behaviors that hurt you or the children. I'd faced so many difficult choices since discovering Preston and Deirdre's betrayal. Now, standing in this lobby, I'm at another crossroads. Do I trust them with this second chance, knowing they might disappoint me again? Or am I setting myself up for more heartache by trying to maintain a connection to my family? Deirdre grabbed Preston's arm when he started to argue. We accept, she said quickly. We don't have other options right now. I nodded, feeling oddly calm. The security guard will take your contact information. Eleanor will draw up the agreement tomorrow. But understand this. 1 violation of the protective order, 1 missed visitation, and the arrangement ends. As they huddled with the security guard, I returned to my apartment, emotions swirling. Had I done the right thing? Was I setting myself up for more manipulation, more pain? I called Tavi, needing her grounding wisdom. "You did what your heart told you to do," she said after I explained. "Just don't confuse helping the grandchildren with enabling their parents." "Do you think people can change?" I asked, watching lights twinkle on the river below my window. Tavi sighed. "Some can, some won't. But those grandkids deserve a chance to know their grandmother, regardless." Over the next week, Eleanor arranged everything: a modest 3-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood, lease in my name, strict conditions spelled out in a legal agreement that Preston and Deirdre signed with visible reluctance. The first supervised visit with Zoe and Hudson took place at a neutral location, a family counseling center where Dr. Patel had privileges. I arrived early, heart pounding, palms sweating like a teenager on a first date. When they walked in, my grandchildren, taller than I remembered after just 6 months, I had to grip my chair to keep from rushing to them. Hudson broke protocol first, running to hug me despite the social worker's gentle reminder about proceeding slowly. "I knew you didn't forget us," he whispered against my shoulder. Zoe held back, watching warily, caught between her parents' narrative and her own memories. "Hi, Grandma," she said finally, accepting my hug with stiff arms that gradually relaxed. We spent an hour together, supervised by the center's staff. I didn't ask about their parents or the foreclosure. Instead, we talked about school, friends, books they were reading. I showed them pictures of my new apartment, promised they could visit once the center approved. "Do you really have your own foundation?" Zoe asked as our time wound down. I nodded. "It helps women my age who need support." "Like you needed support from us but didn't get it," she said with surprising insight. "Something like that. Everyone deserves dignity and safety, especially as they age." Hudson frowned. "Dad says you're trying to make him look bad." I chose my words carefully. "Your father and I disagree about many things, but we both love you and want what's best for you. Sometimes adults make mistakes in how they treat each other. Like when Dad called you crazy but you're not?" Hudson pressed. "Exactly like that." As they left, Zoe hesitated, then hugged me fiercely. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what, sweetheart?" "For believing them, for not calling sooner." I stroked her hair, fighting tears. "You have nothing to be sorry for, nothing at all." That night, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The day had been emotionally exhausting, but healing in ways I hadn't expected. My grandchildren still knew me, still loved me beneath the layers of confusion their parents had created. It wasn't perfect. Preston and Deirdre remained hostile, viewing me as a means to an end rather than family. The wounds were deep, possibly permanent, but something had shifted, a tiny opening where light could enter. My phone chimed with an email from Charles. The Second Chapter Foundation had received a major matching grant from a national organization focused on elder justice. Our work was being recognized, expanded. Women who might otherwise have suffered in silence would find their voices, their power. I thought of Walter, of what he might say if he could see me now. Not just surviving, but thriving, building something meaningful from pain. "Look at you go," I could almost hear him say in that proud way of his. The apartment was quiet as dusk settled into night. No husband's footsteps, no children's laughter, no family dinners around a well-worn table. But also, no pretense, no walking on eggshells, no betrayal lurking in familiar faces. Just me, at 71, finally standing fully in my truth. Wounded, but not broken. Alone, but not lonely. Outside, the first stars appeared, tiny points of light in the darkening sky. I made a wish on the brightest one, not for myself, but for Zoe and Hudson, that they would grow into people who valued authenticity over appearance, compassion over convenience, integrity over ease, and that they would remember, years from now, their grandmother who refused to disappear. 2 years to the day after I moved into my Riverside apartment, I stood at the podium of the Riverside Community Center, surveying the crowd gathered for the Second Chapter Foundation's anniversary gala. The room glittered with candlelight and possibility, elegant table settings contrasting with the raw industrial space we'd renovated specifically for this purpose. When I was a young nurse, I began, my voice carrying through the sound system, I saw firsthand how invisible older women often become. In hospital rooms, in family discussions, in society at large, we're expected to shrink, to accommodate, to disappear into the background of other people's lives. Faces looked back at me. Donors, clients, volunteers, supporters. Among them, Tavi sat at the front table, elegant in midnight blue, nodding encouragement. Beside her, Eleanor and Dr. Patel, now not just colleagues but dear friends. 2 years ago, I refused to disappear when it was expected of me. Instead, I chose to grow larger, to take up more space, not just for myself, but for every woman who's been told her time of relevance has passed. My gaze found Zoe and Hudson, now 15 and 13, seated at a table near the back with their court-appointed guardian, Maria. Their presence was bittersweet, a victory and a reminder of all that had been lost. The past 2 years had unfolded in ways I couldn't have predicted. Preston and Deirdre had complied with the visitation schedule and counseling requirements for exactly 3 months before violations began. First small ones, bringing the children late, canceling at the last minute, speaking negatively about me during visits. Then larger ones, missing appointments altogether, refusing to participate in therapy, violating the terms of the housing agreement by subletting a room to a stranger without my knowledge. The final straw came when Preston was arrested for drunk driving with the children in the car. Eleanor had immediately filed for emergency custody, and after a thorough investigation, the court had appointed Maria, now retired from our foundation's reception desk, as the children's guardian. Preston and Deirdre had left the state shortly after, abandoning the children as easily as they'd tried to discard me. Last I heard, they were in Florida, trying to rebuild their lives with whatever resources they could scrape together. Without access to my fortune, they'd had to face the consequences of their choices for perhaps the first time in their adult lives. In our 2 years of operation, I continued, the Second Chapter Foundation has served over 200 women across 3 states. We've recovered more than $5 million in stolen assets, secured safe housing for dozens of displaced seniors, and provided over 10,000 hours of legal, psychological, and financial counseling. Applause rippled through the crowd. I caught Charles's eye from his seat near the stage. The pride in his expression reminded me so much of Walter that my breath caught momentarily. But numbers tell only part of the story. The real measure of our work lies in the women who have reclaimed their dignity, their security, their sense of self. Women who refused to be erased. I glanced down at my notes, then set them aside. The next part needed to come from the heart. I stand before you today not just as the founder of this organization, but as someone who has walked this path, who knows what it means to realize that the people you most trusted see you as nothing more than an obstacle or a resource, who has felt the particular sting of betrayal that comes when family decides your usefulness has ended. The room was silent now. Every face turned toward me. I won't pretend the journey has been easy. There have been days when grief threatened to overwhelm me, when I questioned every decision, every boundary I've set, when I wondered if the price of my dignity and autonomy was too high. I smiled then, letting myself feel the full weight of the moment. But then I think of the women who come through our doors, afraid, often ashamed, believing themselves somehow responsible for the abuse they've suffered. I think of the transformation when they realize they're not alone, that they have value beyond what they can provide to others, that their lives are still unfolding, still full of possibility. My voice caught slightly, and I paused to collect myself. In the brief silence, I heard a small sniff from the audience. Dr. Patel, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Walter, my late husband, used to say that the measure of a life well lived isn't in what you acquire, but in what you build. The Second Chapter Foundation is what I've built from pain. It's my answer to betrayal, my refusal to let heartbreak have the final word. The fundraising portion of the evening followed, with Charles announcing a series of matching grants that would allow us to open 2 additional offices in neighboring states. By the time dinner was served, we'd exceeded our financial goal for the evening by nearly 40%. As I made my way through the crowd afterward, accepting congratulations and hearing stories from supporters, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Zoe stood there, taller than me now at 15, her dark hair swept into an elegant updo that made her look startlingly grown up. "That was a really good speech, Grandma," she said, wrapping me in a quick hug. "I recorded parts of it for my women's history project at school." "Thank you, sweetheart." I squeezed her hand. "Where's your brother?" She rolled her eyes affectionately. "By the dessert table, obviously. It's like his 6th cupcake." We laughed together, this easy camaraderie still a marvel after all we'd been through. The first months after Preston and Deirdre's departure had been rocky, the children confused, angry, grieving in their own ways. But Maria had been a stabilizing presence, and the consistency of my involvement in their lives had slowly rebuilt trust. "How's the college search going?" I asked as we found a quiet corner to sit. Zoe's eyes lit up. "I got my acceptance letter from Stanford yesterday, early admission for the pre-med program." "Oh, Zoe!" I pulled her into another hug. "I'm so proud of you. Your grandfather would have been over the moon." Her smile dimmed slightly at the mention of Walter. "I wish I'd known him better. All I really remember is him being sick at the end." "He would have adored the young woman you've become," I told her. "Brilliant, compassionate, resilient. Like you," she said simply. The compliment warmed me more than she could know. For all the pain of the past few years, watching my grandchildren grow into thoughtful, empathetic young people was a gift beyond measure. Hudson joined us moments later, chocolate frosting at the corner of his mouth. At 13, he was all gangly limbs and boundless energy, already showing signs of the tall man he would become. "Maria says we need to head out soon," he reported. "I have that science competition tomorrow morning." "The robotics one?" I asked. He nodded enthusiastically. "Our team built this awesome search and rescue robot. It can navigate through simulated disaster zones and identify survivors." "I wouldn't miss it," I promised. Since gaining regular access to my grandchildren, I'd made a point of attending every significant event in their lives: school performances, sports matches, academic competitions, being present in ways their parents never had been. As they prepared to leave with Maria, Zoe hesitated. "Have you heard anything from Dad recently?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. I shook my head. "Not in several months." She nodded, something complex passing across her features. "It's probably better that way." The maturity in her assessment broke my heart a little. No child should have to accept their parents' abandonment with such resigned understanding. "Your father has his own demons to fight," I said gently. "That doesn't diminish the love I know he felt for you and Hudson, in his way." "Maybe," she said, unconvinced. "But love that only works on someone else's terms isn't really love, is it? That's what Dr. Patel says." As they walked away, I felt the familiar mixture of sadness and pride. My grandchildren had learned harsh lessons about family at too young an age, but they were also growing into people with a clear-eyed understanding of healthy boundaries and genuine love, something Preston had never managed to grasp. Later that night, as the event wound down, Tavi and I shared a quiet moment on the center's rooftop garden. The city sparkled below us, a tapestry of lights against the darkness. "Quite a night," she said, clinking her water glass against mine. At 75, she'd given up alcohol entirely, claiming it interfered with her judicial sharpness, despite being retired from the bench for years. "Better than I expected," I agreed. "The new funding will make such a difference." "Not just the money," Tavi said. "The awareness. Every person in that room tonight knows someone who might need our services. The ripple effect will be enormous." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two old friends who no longer needed to fill every space with words. "Have you ever regretted it?" Tavi asked finally. "Standing up to Preston and Deirdre? Choosing this path instead of just going along to keep the peace?" I considered the question seriously. "I've grieved what was lost," I said slowly. "The family I thought I had, the son I raised and loved, the relationship I wanted with my grandchildren's parents." The night air was cool against my skin, carrying the scent of the river nearby. But regret? No, because what I gained was myself, my dignity, my purpose, and in the end, a more honest relationship with Zoe and Hudson than I ever could have had otherwise. Tavi nodded, satisfied. That's what I figured you'd say. Still, it couldn't have been easy. The hardest thing I've ever done, I admitted. Some days I still wake up and for a split second I forget everything that's happened. I think I'm back in my old house with my family intact. And then I remember. And there's pain. But there's also freedom, Tavi finished for me. Exactly. I smiled at my oldest friend, this woman who'd stood beside me through the darkest moments. Freedom to be fully myself for perhaps the first time in my life. 3 days later, I sat in the bleachers of Hudson's school gymnasium, watching his robotics team compete. Beside me, Dr. Patel cheered enthusiastically as Hudson's team robot successfully navigated a particularly challenging obstacle course. They're going to win, she predicted, leaning toward me. That device is at least 2 generations ahead of the competition. I nodded proudly. Hudson had inherited Walter's mechanical aptitude, spending hours in the workshop space I'd helped set up in Maria's garage. What had started as a distraction from his parents' abandonment had blossomed into genuine passion and talent. My phone vibrated in my purse. A text from Zoe. Dad just called me. First time in 8 months. Says he wants to reconnect. What should I do? My heart constricted. For all Preston's faults, he was still these children's father. Yet I couldn't forget how easily he'd walked away when the money dried up and the responsibility became too great. I thought carefully before responding. That's a big decision, sweetheart. What does your heart tell you? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I'm not ready. Maybe someday, but not now. Then that's your answer, I texted back. Your feelings matter. Your boundaries matter. I support whatever you decide. A heart emoji came back immediately. I slipped the phone back into my purse just as Hudson's team was announced as the winner. He looked up into the stands, finding me easily, his face alight with joy as he pumped his fist in victory. I clapped until my hands hurt, throat raw from cheering. This, I thought, is what it means to truly love, to show up, to witness, to celebrate, to support without conditions or expectations. The following week brought a letter from an unexpected source, Deirdre. The Florida postmark surprised me. Last I'd heard, she and Preston had separated, their relationship another casualty of their mutual disappointments. I recognized her handwriting immediately on the cream-colored envelope, the precise, controlled penmanship so at odds with her chaotic personality. For a moment, I considered throwing it away unopened. What could she possibly have to say that I needed to hear? But curiosity won out. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in the same meticulous script. Vivian, I don't expect forgiveness or understanding. What Preston and I did was unforgivable. But as I work through my 4th step in recovery, I'm 9 months sober now, I'm compelled to make amends where possible. The truth is, I was drowning in debt and desperation when we targeted you. Preston had gambled away our savings, and I'd maxed out credit cards trying to maintain appearances. We saw you as our last hope, not as a person with rights and dignity. I'm deeply ashamed of that now. You were right to fight back, right to protect yourself, right to ensure Zoe and Hudson had stability when we couldn't provide it. I don't know if Preston will ever face his demons the way I'm trying to face mine. But I wanted you to know that at least one of us recognizes the pain we caused and regrets it profoundly. Deirdre. I read the letter 3 times, emotions shifting with each reading, skepticism, anger, grudging respect, and finally, a quiet acceptance. People could change, it seemed. Sometimes tragedy became the catalyst for transformation. I didn't respond to the letter. Some bridges once burned couldn't be rebuilt, at least not in the same form. But I did share it with Dr. Patel, who noted that authentic recovery often includes such attempts at amends, however belated. What will you do if Preston makes a similar overture? She asked during one of our regular lunches. I thought about it, fork suspended above my salad. Listen, I suppose, without expectation or obligation. Beyond that, I can't say. Would I ever truly forgive my son? Could I trust him again after what had happened? After 73 years of life, I've learned that some questions don't have immediate answers, that living in the uncertain spaces between betrayal and healing, between love and self-protection, is often the most honest place to be. Has my story ended the way I would have chosen? No, but perhaps that's true for most lives. We plan, we hope, we build our houses of expectation, and then reality, with its harsh winds and unexpected currents, reshapes everything. What matters, I've found, is not the perfection of our circumstances, but how we respond to them. Whether we allow disappointment to diminish us or use it as material for something new and meaningful. The night of the gala, as Tavi and I stood on that rooftop watching the city lights, she'd asked me one more question. What's next for Vivian Blackwood? At 73, with a successful foundation, reconnected grandchildren, and a life rebuilt from betrayal's ashes, it might have seemed like my story was concluding. A neat final chapter with all conflicts resolved, all wounds healed, all questions answered. But that's not how real lives work, is it? As long as we draw breath, our stories continue to unfold in unexpected ways. What's next? I'd repeated, considering. Everything. Everything is still possible. And in that moment, gazing out at the vast night sky, I felt the truth of those words settle into my bones. Life at 73 wasn't an epilogue or a conclusion. It was simply the current chapter in an ongoing story, one I was writing with each choice, each stand, each refusal to disappear. I had no way of knowing what challenges or joys the coming years would bring. Whether Preston would find his way back to some version of redemption. Whether Zoe would become the surgeon she dreamed of being. Whether Hudson's brilliant mind would create technologies that changed the world. But I did know this. I would face whatever came with the same quiet strength that had carried me through the darkest moments. Not as a victim or a martyr, but as a woman who had reclaimed her power and refused to relinquish it again. This wasn't just my second chapter, I realized. It was my best chapter yet. What would you do if you found yourself in my position today? Would you have the courage to stand up for yourself, even against your own family? Or would you choose a different path? If you've faced family challenges or know someone in this situation, share in the comments below. It's never too late to start over and find your voice. Tell me what you would do in my place.